The massive warship Void Hunter moved through space like a hungry beast. Its dark metal hull stretched for miles, and its weapons could destroy entire planets. Inside the ship, thousands of alien soldiers prepared for their next conquest. The Cretherian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 300 years, and no species had ever stood against them for long. Commander Zexhai stood in the main briefing room watching his troops gather. The room buzzed with excitement and laughter. His soldiers came from dozens of different worlds that the Empire had conquered. There were the tall gray Vexillans with their forearms. The insect-like Chitauri clicked their mandibles as they talked. The rock-skinned Gorvani stomped across the metal floor, making loud sounds with each step. Lieutenant Vextul walked up to the front of the room carrying a datapad. He was young for a Cretherian officer with bright yellow eyes and sharp teeth that showed when he smiled. The room grew quiet as he began to speak about their next target. "Soldiers of the Empire, we move toward human space," Vextul announced. His voice carried across the room easily. "Our scouts have been watching them for months. They are a weak species that has barely left their home system." A Chitauri soldier raised one of his clawed arms. "What about the reports we heard, Lieutenant? The humans have stories about their warriors that sound impossible." Vextul laughed, and his teeth gleamed under the bright lights. "Ah yes, the human legends. Let me share some of these funny tales with you all." He touched his datapad, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a human male with brown hair and green eyes. The image rotated slowly so everyone could see. "This human is called Jake Morrison," Vextul said with amusement in his voice. According to their records, he once held off an entire battalion of enemy soldiers by himself. They say he fought for 3 days without food or water and never retreated even when his weapons ran out of ammunition. The alien soldiers burst into laughter. A Gorvani warrior slammed his rocky fist on his knee, making a sound like thunder. "One human against a battalion. That is the funniest joke I've heard all year." Vextul waited for the laughter to die down before continuing. "But wait, there is more. Here is another one they call Linda Hayes." A new hologram replaced the first one. This time it showed a human female with blonde hair and blue eyes. She looked small and weak compared to any of the alien warriors in the room. The humans claim this tiny female once destroyed an entire enemy base using only explosives she made from common materials. They say she crawled through enemy lines for 2 days and planted bombs in 20 different locations. When she was discovered, she fought her way out and detonated everything from a safe distance. More laughter filled the room. A Vexillan soldier wiped tears from his 4 eyes. "These humans must tell these stories to make themselves feel brave. No single warrior could do such things." Vextul nodded and showed more holograms. Each one brought new tales of impossible human feats. There was Danny Cooper, who supposedly jumped from a burning aircraft and landed behind enemy lines where he captured an entire command center. There was Susan Davis, who they claimed fought a space battle against 5 enemy ships and won using only an old cargo vessel. The best part, Vextul continued between fits of laughter, is that the humans actually believe these stories. They teach them to their children and put up statues to honor these imaginary heroes. A Chitauri warrior clicked his mandibles rapidly, which was how his species showed amusement. Perhaps they think if they tell enough lies they will become true. The room erupted in fresh laughter and jokes. Some soldiers began making up their own ridiculous human stories. They spoke of humans who could fly without ships and humans who could survive in the vacuum of space, without protective suits. Through all of this, Commander Zexhai remained silent at the back of the room. His dark eyes watched the celebration, but he did not join in the laughter. His claws tapped nervously against his side, and his mandibles clicked quietly in a way that showed worry rather than amusement. Vextul noticed his commander's silence and walked over to him. "Commander, is something wrong? You seem troubled." Zexhai looked at his young officer for a long moment before responding. "Continue with the briefing, Lieutenant. Tell the troops about our invasion plans." Vextul seemed confused by his commander's cold response, but he returned to the front of the room. "Our target is a human colony called New Haven. Intelligence reports show they have only a small defense force and outdated weapons. The planet should fall within hours of our arrival." The soldiers cheered and banged their weapons against the floor. The sound echoed through the ship like rolling thunder. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, and New Haven would just be another easy victory. "When do we reach this human world?" asked a Gorvani captain. "We drop out of hyperspace in 18 hours, Vextul replied. "All units should be ready for immediate deployment. Command expects total victory within 1 standard day." As the briefing ended and the soldiers filed out of the room, their laughter and jokes continued. They shared more made-up stories about weak humans and easy conquests. Some even made bets about how quickly they could capture the planet. Commander Zexhai waited until the room was empty except for himself and Vextool. The young lieutenant approached him again with curiosity in his yellow eyes. "Commander, I must ask again, why do you seem so serious? This should be a simple operation." Zexhai walked to the large window that showed the stars streaming past as they traveled through hyperspace. His reflection looked back at him from the glass. For a moment he seemed older than his years. "Lieutenant, have you ever wondered why High Command classified most of the intelligence about humans?" Vextool thought about this question. It was true that much of their information about humanity came from basic scouts rather than detailed military analysis. I assumed it was because they posed no real threat to the Empire. Zexhai's mandibles clicked softly. Perhaps. Or perhaps there are things about humans that Command does not want the general troops to know. Before Vextool could ask what he meant, the commander walked toward the door. "Make sure all units are ready for deployment, Lieutenant. And remind the troops that overconfidence has killed more soldiers than enemy fire." As Zexhai left the room, Vextool stared after him with growing confusion. What could possibly worry a commander who had led successful invasions on 50 different worlds? The humans were just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. Their legends were nothing but stories told by a weak people, trying to feel strong. Outside the ship, the stars continued to stream past as the Void Hunter carried its army toward New Haven. In 18 hours they would discover if human legends were just stories or something much more dangerous. Commander Zexhai already knew the answer, but he kept that knowledge to himself as the ship raced toward its destiny. The Void Hunter dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system, with a flash of blue light. 18 other warships appeared around it, forming a massive battle formation. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could level cities, and their combined firepower could crack a planet's crust. Commander Zexhai stood on the bridge, watching the tactical displays come alive with information. New Haven appeared on the main screen as a blue and green world that looked peaceful from space. Cities dotted the continents and orbital. Platforms surrounded the planet like tiny jewels catching starlight. Long-range sensors are picking up minimal defense activity, Commander, reported the ship's tactical officer. "We detect only a handful of patrol ships and basic planetary shields." Lieutenant Vextool moved to stand beside his commander. "Just as intelligence predicted. This will be easier than our last 3 conquests." Zexhai said nothing as he studied the readings. His experienced eyes noticed something that troubled him. The human ships were not running away or hiding behind their planet's defenses. Instead, they were moving to intercept the invasion fleet. "Sensor contact approaching from bearing 27 Mark IV, called out a bridge officer. "Single vessel human configuration." On the main screen, a small ship appeared, growing larger as it approached their position. It was barely the size of one of their fighter craft, and its hull showed signs of age and wear. The vessel looked like a cargo hauler that someone had fitted with basic weapons. "They are sending one ship against our entire fleet," Vextool laughed. "The humans must be completely insane." The communications officer looked up from his station with surprise on his face. "Commander, the human ship is broadcasting a message." "Put it through," Zexhai ordered. Static filled the bridge speakers before a human voice came through, clear and steady. The translator converted the alien words into something they could understand. "This is Captain Rick Davis of the New Haven Colonial Defense Force. You have entered human space without permission. Turn your ships around and leave, or we will consider this an act of war." Silence fell across the bridge as the alien officers stared at each other in disbelief. Finally, Vextool started laughing so hard that tears ran down his scaled cheeks. "Did he just threaten our entire fleet with his one little ship?" Vextool gasped between laughs. "These humans are even funnier than their legends." Other bridge officers joined in the laughter, but Commander Zexhai remained serious. He had heard that tone of voice before in the classified recordings he had studied. It was not the voice of someone making empty threats. "Open a channel," Zexhai ordered. When the communications officer signaled ready, he spoke directly to the human captain. "This is Commander Zexhai of the Cretherian Empire. You cannot stop us, Captain Davis. Surrender now and your people will be treated fairly." The human's response came immediately without hesitation. "Commander, I have a wife named Carol and 2 kids waiting for me at home. I swore an oath to protect this world and everyone on it. I will not surrender and I will not run away." Vextel shook his head in amazement. He actually believes he can fight us. This is better entertainment than the arena games back home. All ships target that vessel and fire warning shots, Zexhai commanded. Give him one more chance to withdraw. 20 ships opened fire, but their weapons deliberately missed the small human craft. Energy beams lit up space around Captain Davis's ship like deadly fireworks. The display of power was meant to show the human how hopeless his situation was. The response was not what anyone expected. Instead of retreating, the human ship accelerated directly toward the nearest Cretherian destroyer. Warning alarms began sounding across multiple alien vessels as they detected incoming missiles. How many missiles did that little ship launch? Demanded. Zexhai, his tactical officer, checked his readings twice before answering. Sensors show 6 missiles inbound, Commander. But that is impossible. A ship that size cannot carry more than 2 or 3 weapons. Captain Davis's voice came through the speakers again, calm and professional, despite the impossible odds he faced.
All missiles armed and running true.
Carol, if you can hear this transmission, tell the kids their daddy loves them. New Haven Control, be advised that enemy fleet consists of 20 capital ships with heavy armor and shielding. The first missile struck the destroyer before its point defense systems could react. The explosion sent debris spinning away into space. The second and third missiles followed seconds later, punching holes through the warship's hull. The destroyer began listing to one side as atmosphere leaked from its damaged sections. How is this possible? Vextel shouted over the noise of damage reports. Those missiles should have been stopped by our shields. The human appears to be using some kind of adaptive targeting system, reported the tactical officer. His weapons are adjusting their frequency to match our shield harmonics. The fourth missile struck another ship in the formation, causing similar damage. The fifth missile was finally stopped by defensive fire, but the sixth one got through to score another hit on the first destroyer. Captain Davis's ship was now well within the killing zone of the alien fleet, but he showed no sign of trying to escape. Instead, he launched 2 more missiles that seemed to appear from nowhere. Where is he getting these weapons? Zexhai demanded. Scan that ship again. Commander, his sensor operator called out with shock in his voice. The human vessel appears to be manufacturing missiles in real time. They have somehow converted their cargo bay into a weapons factory. On the main screen, they could see Davis's ship, weaving between energy blasts from dozens of alien weapons. The small craft moved like a dancer, avoiding most shots while taking minor hits that should have destroyed it. Somehow the human kept his ship running and fighting. This is Captain Davis to New Haven Control. I have inflicted damage on 3 enemy vessels, but my ship is failing. Beginning final attack run on enemy flagship. Vextel grabbed his commander's arm. He is coming directly at us. His ship is on a collision course. Zexhai studied the tactical display and realized what the human was planning. All batteries focus fire on that ship. Destroy it now before he reaches us. Every weapon on the Void Hunter opened fire along with guns from 6 other ships. The space around Captain Davis's vessel filled with deadly energy. His ship took hit after hit as its hull began to glow red from the intense heat. Shields failing. Davis's voice came through the speakers, but he sounded strangely calm. Hull breach on decks 2 and 3. Life support is offline. The human ship should have been destroyed by now, but somehow it kept coming. Parts of its hull were missing and flames leaked from several openings, but Davis maintained his course straight toward the alien flagship. Impact in 30 seconds, Commander, reported the tactical officer. All ships concentrate fire, Zexhai ordered, but he knew it was already too late. The human had timed his attack perfectly. This is Captain Davis making my final report. Enemy fleet strength is 20 ships with heavy weapons and advanced shields. They are vulnerable to adaptive frequency weapons and concentrated missile attacks. Tell General Murphy on Earth that the legends are real. Tell my wife Carol and the kids that Earth remembers. New Haven stands. Captain Davis's ship struck the Void Hunter's forward section and exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. The blast tore through 3 decks and killed hundreds of Cretherian soldiers. Emergency lights flashed across the bridge as damage control teams rushed to contain the breach. When the emergency was finally under control, Commander Zexhai looked around his damaged bridge. The laughter and jokes from earlier had died completely. His officers stared at their displays in stunned silence. Damage report, Zexhai ordered quietly. Forward sections 7 through 12 are destroyed, Commander. We lost the primary sensor array and 2 weapon batteries. Casualty reports are still coming in, but early estimates show over 400 dead. Vextel slowly walked to stand beside his commander. His face had gone pale and his hands shook slightly. "Commander, that was just one human in an old cargo ship. How did he do so much damage?" Zexhai looked at the tactical display showing the debris field where Captain Davis had made his final stand. One man in an outdated ship had damaged 3 warships and killed hundreds of trained soldiers. The human had never wavered, never hesitated, and never considered retreat as an option. "Send word to the surface, Commander," called the communications officer. "The human colonies are broadcasting Captain Davis's final message across all frequencies. They are calling it a victory." For the first time since the battle began, Commander Zexhai felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans called this a victory, even though they had lost their only defender. They celebrated one man's death because he had proved something to them and to the galaxy. "All ships proceed to invasion positions," Zexhai commanded. "Begin orbital bombardment of military targets only." As the fleet moved toward New Haven, he stared at the planet below and wondered what other surprises waited for them on the surface. Captain Davis had just shown the entire invasion force that human legends might be more than just stories after all. The first Cretherian dropships descended through New Haven's atmosphere like falling meteors. Each massive transport carried 500 fully armed soldiers ready to crush any resistance they encountered. Intelligence reports promised them a quick victory against a lightly defended agricultural world. General Krixta stood in the lead transport watching the planet's surface grow larger through the viewports. Cities and farmland stretched to the horizon under a blue sky dotted with white clouds. It looked peaceful and defenseless, just like dozens of other worlds the Empire had conquered. "Final approach to landing zone Alpha," announced the pilot. "No enemy activity detected on sensors." Krixta nodded and activated his communication system. "All units, this is General Krixta. Intelligence indicates minimal human military presence planetside. We expect to secure major population centers within 6 hours of landing." The transport ships touched down in a massive open field outside New Haven's largest city. Thousands of alien soldiers poured out of the vessels in perfect formation. Their advanced weapons and armor gleamed in the morning sunlight as they prepared to march on their first target. "Sir," called out Major Hexron as he approached the general, "we have established contact with the human leadership. They are requesting terms for surrender." Krixta smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Excellent. Have them gather in the city center and we will accept their formal submission." But something felt wrong to the experienced general as his troops formed up for the advance. The humans had asked for surrender terms too quickly and too easily. In his long military career, he had learned to be suspicious when enemies gave up without any fight at all. The alien army began its march toward the city with perfect precision. 10,000 soldiers moved in coordinated columns with heavy vehicles and flying gun platforms providing support. No military force on New Haven should have been able to stop such overwhelming power. They were halfway to the city when the first explosion occurred. A supply truck at the rear of the formation simply disappeared in a ball of fire and smoke. The soldiers around it were thrown to the ground by the blast wave. "What happened back there?" Krixta demanded over his radio. "Unknown, sir. The transport just exploded without warning. We are checking for survivors." Before anyone could investigate further, 2 more explosions rocked the column. This time they were closer to the front and took out an armored fighting vehicle along with its crew. Alien soldiers began looking around nervously, trying to spot hidden enemies. "Defensive positions," ordered Krixta. "All units scan for hostile contacts." His army spread out across the field using their advanced sensors to search for threats. The equipment could detect heat signatures through solid rock and pick up electronic devices from miles away. But the scans showed nothing except empty farmland and distant trees. A voice suddenly echoed across the battlefield, coming from hidden speakers. It was calm and steady, with a slight accent that the translators identified as human. "This is Sergeant Major Tony Rodriguez of the New Haven Colonial Defense Force. You are trespassing on sovereign human territory. Leave now or face the consequences." General Krixta activated his external speakers so his voice would carry across the field. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I am General Krixta of the Cretherian Empire. You are surrounded by 10,000 soldiers with superior weapons and technology. Surrender immediately." Laughter came from the hidden speakers, followed by Rodriguez's voice again. "General, you might want to count your soldiers again. I make it closer to 9,700 now." As if to prove his point, another explosion destroyed a communication vehicle on the army's left flank. The blast was perfectly timed and placed to cause maximum damage. More concerning was the fact that no one had seen the attack coming. How are they doing this? Major Hexron whispered to his general. Our sensors show no enemy positions. Before Krixta could answer, the attacks began in earnest. Explosions erupted throughout the alien formation with deadly precision. Supply trucks, armored vehicles, and weapon platforms started disappearing one by one. Each blast took out exactly the right target to cause the most disruption. Return fire, Krixta shouted. All units engage any target you can identify. His soldiers opened fire in all directions, filling the air with energy beams and explosive shells. They shot at trees, rocks, farm buildings, and anything that might hide an enemy position. But their wild firing revealed how confused and frightened they had become. The human attacks continued with mechanical precision. A fuel depot exploded, sending flames hundreds of feet into the air. An ammunition carrier detonated, taking out 2 nearby vehicles. A command post simply vanished, leaving only a smoking crater where it had stood. Through it all, the aliens never saw their attackers. Their enemies fought like ghosts, appearing just long enough to strike, before fading back into invisibility. Every few minutes, Rodriguez's voice would return to announce their latest casualty count with cheerful accuracy. General Krixta, this is Rodriguez again. You are now down to about 9,000 effective troops. Still think this is going to be easy? The alien general was beginning to understand that he faced something completely outside his experience. His army had the best technology the Empire could provide, but the humans were winning through tactics he had never encountered before. All units advance to the city, Krixta ordered. We will not be stopped by invisible cowards. The Critherian force resumed its march, but now every step forward cost them dearly. Hidden mines exploded under their vehicles. Sniper fire picked off officers and key personnel. Supply lines dissolved as trucks and their escorts simply vanished without trace. As they approached the outskirts of the city, the attacks intensified. Buildings that looked empty suddenly erupted with weapons fire before falling silent again. Sewers and storm drains became death traps that swallowed entire squads. Street signs and traffic lights concealed explosives that detonated with perfect timing. Major Lisa Bennett led one of the most devastating attacks of the day. She and her team somehow infiltrated the aliens' mobile command center and planted explosives throughout the vehicle. The blast destroyed months of intelligence data and killed dozens of senior officers. But Bennett was not finished. Her squad had also stolen the aliens' complete tactical database, including unit positions, troop strength, and communication codes. The information was transmitted to human forces across the planet before the aliens even realized what had happened. Death before dishonor. Bennett's voice came over captured alien radios. The phrase was repeated by human fighters throughout the city as they pressed their attacks with renewed fury. By sunset, General Krixta's mighty army had been reduced to fewer than 7,000 effective soldiers. They had advanced less than 10 miles from their landing zone and controlled nothing except the ground they stood on. Supply shortages were becoming critical as more transport vehicles disappeared. Sir, Major Hexron reported with exhaustion in his voice. We are receiving casualty reports from all sectors. Medical facilities are overwhelmed and ammunition supplies are running dangerously low. Krixta looked around at his demoralized troops. Many of them jumped at shadows and fired at empty buildings. The confident warriors who had landed that morning were being replaced by nervous soldiers who feared an enemy they could not see or understand. Rodriguez's voice came over their speakers one final time as darkness fell across the battlefield. General, this is your final warning. My people have families to protect and homes to defend. We will never stop fighting you. Leave our world now while you still can. The alien general stared at the city lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, a few hundred human defenders were making his vastly superior army look like amateurs. They fought with a dedication and skill that defied everything he knew about warfare. Establish a defensive perimeter, Krixta finally ordered. We will reassess our situation in the morning. As his exhausted troops dug in for the night, the general realized he was facing something unprecedented in the Empire's history. These humans were not fighting just to win a battle. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and their way of life. That kind of motivation made them more dangerous than any advanced weapon. In the darkness around their positions, the humans continued their relentless campaign. Sentries disappeared without a sound. Equipment malfunctioned in ways that should have been impossible. Supply convoys never reached their destinations. General Krixta sat in his damaged command vehicle and wondered if Captain Davis's sacrifice had been more than just one man's heroic death. Perhaps it had been a warning that the legends were real and the Empire had finally met an enemy it could not easily defeat. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges and more impossible human tactics. Tonight he could only listen to the sounds of his army slowly being picked apart by ghosts who refused to fight fair. Commander HFY stood alone in his private quarters aboard the Void Hunter, staring at classified files that glowed on his personal display screen. The battle for New Haven had been raging for 3 weeks, and his forces were no closer to victory than on the first day. Every report from the surface told the same impossible story. The humans were winning. A soft chime announced someone at his door, and Lieutenant Vextool entered carrying the latest casualty reports. The young officer looked tired and confused after weeks of watching their mighty invasion force struggle against a handful of human defenders. "Commander, the latest numbers from General Krixta," Vextool said as he placed the datapad on the desk. "We have lost over 4,000 soldiers in the past week alone. Our remaining forces control less than 20% of their original objectives." HFY glanced at the numbers without surprise. He had been expecting reports like this ever since they first encountered Captain Davis. The human pilot's sacrifice had been a warning that everyone chose to ignore. "What does General Krixta request?" HFY asked quietly. "He wants orbital bombardment of the entire city, sir. He says conventional tactics are not working against these humans. They fight like demons and seem to know our moves before we make them." The commander closed his eyes and felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. Orbital bombardment would solve their immediate problem, but it would also destroy everything they had come to conquer. The Empire needed New Haven's resources and population intact, not turned into radioactive rubble. "Denied," HFY said finally. "Tell the general to continue current operations." Vextool stared at his commander with growing frustration. "Sir, with respect, I do not understand your reluctance to use our full military power. These are just humans. They should not be able to resist us for so long." HFY stood up and walked to the large viewport that showed New Haven turning slowly below them. City lights dotted the night side of the planet like scattered stars. It looked peaceful from orbit, but he knew that down there human fighters were preparing for another night of impossible victories. "Lieutenant, sit down," HFY said without turning from the window. "It is time I told you the truth about our enemy." Vextool took a seat and waited as his commander seemed to gather his thoughts. When HFY finally spoke, his voice was quiet and filled with something that sounded like respect. 15 years ago, I was a junior officer on a deep space reconnaissance mission. Our task was to survey the outer regions of this spiral arm, looking for new worlds to add to the Empire. We discovered Earth purely by accident. The commander activated a holographic display that showed a blue and white planet, surrounded by small moons. It looked similar to New Haven, but somehow more vibrant and alive. Earth is the human homeworld, Lieutenant. 3 billion people living on one small planet in an unremarkable star system. Our orders were to observe and report back with recommendations for conquest. Vextool leaned forward with interest. "What did your reconnaissance team discover, sir?" HFY touched a control and the hologram changed to show images of human cities and landscapes. Everything looked primitive compared to Criterion technology, but there was something about the scenes that spoke of determination and strength. "We spent 2 years studying human civilization, Lieutenant. We watched their news broadcasts, monitored their military communications, and observed their conflicts. What we learned changed everything I thought I knew about warfare. New images appeared showing human soldiers in various historical battles, men and women fighting in conditions that should have been impossible to survive." HFY highlighted specific scenes as he continued his story. These humans were fighting something they called World War II. We watched them during a siege of a city named Stalingrad. The temperature was -40 degrees and they had no food supplies or ammunition. Logic said they should surrender within days. The hologram showed frozen streets filled with rubble and desperate human defenders. They looked small and fragile compared to Criterion warriors, but their eyes held something that Vextool had never seen before. "They fought for 5 months, Lieutenant. 5 months in conditions that would kill most species in days. They ate bark and leather to survive. They made weapons from scrap metal and explosives from household chemicals, and they never considered surrender as an option." Vextool stared at the images, trying to understand what drove these humans to such extremes. Surely that was an exceptional case, Commander. One battle does not represent their entire species. HFY smiled grimly and showed more recordings. "I thought the same thing until we observed more of their conflicts. Here we see Marines assaulting a fortified island they called Iwo Jima. The enemy had superior positions and overwhelming firepower. The new scenes showed humans charging across open ground into certain death. They fell by the hundreds, but more kept coming. Those who reached the enemy positions fought hand-to-hand with knives and improvised weapons. They took that island, Lieutenant, even though it cost them 27,000 casualties. They knew they were going to die, but they kept fighting because their mission required it, not for conquest or glory, but because their fellow humans depended on them. More images flashed across the display, each one showing the same pattern. Human soldiers advancing into impossible odds, civilians running into burning buildings to save strangers, ordinary people choosing death before dishonor in 1,000 different ways. The most remarkable thing we observed, HFY continued, was an event they call the September 11th attacks. Terrorists crashed aircraft into civilian buildings, killing thousands of innocent people. Vextel watched as the hologram showed the aftermath of the attacks. Smoke and destruction filled human cities while rescue workers dug through the rubble. Their response was not what we expected, Lieutenant. Instead of cowering in fear, they became stronger. Firefighters ran into collapsing buildings to save people they had never met. Ordinary citizens donated blood and supplies to help strangers. Their entire society came together with a unity we have never seen in any species. The commander paused the display and looked directly at his young officer. "Do you understand what this means, Vextel? These humans are not fighting us because they think they can win. They are fighting because they cannot imagine doing anything else." Vexatul shook his head in confusion. "But Commander, these are just historical events. Surely their current generation has grown soft and civilized like most conquered species." HFY laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "That is what I hoped, Lieutenant, until I read the classified reports from our intelligence division. The same reports that High Command ordered sealed from general distribution. New files appeared on the display showing recent human activities, space colonies, military exercises, and civilian disaster responses all showed the same patterns their ancestors had displayed. Look at this footage from a mining accident on their colony world Titan Prime. An explosion trapped 200 workers deep underground. With no hope of rescue, the logical response would be to accept the loss and evacuate the survivors. The hologram showed human rescue teams working frantically in dangerous conditions. They dug through collapsed tunnels for days while more cave-ins threatened to kill them all. They worked for 6 days straight without rest, Lieutenant. 30 volunteers died trying to reach those trapped miners. But they saved 173 people who should have been left for dead. They called it their duty. Vextel stared at the images with growing understanding. These were not the actions of a weak or primitive species. These were the actions of beings who possessed something the Empire had never encountered before. The humans have a concept they call the warrior spirit, HFY explained. It is not about training or equipment or superior numbers. It is about refusing to accept defeat no matter what the odds. The commander showed one final image that made Vexatul gasp in surprise. It was a recording of Tony Rodriguez during a training exercise on New Haven. The human sergeant was teaching young colonists how to fight using nothing but determination and improvised weapons. Sergeant Rodriguez is not a professional soldier, Lieutenant. He was a teacher before the invasion began. But watch how he trains his people. He is not teaching them tactics or weapons handling. He is teaching them to never give up. In the recording, Rodriguez spoke to a group of teenage humans with quiet intensity. "Remember that the enemy has better guns and stronger armor than we do. But they cannot match our hearts. They fight for conquest. We fight for each other." HFY turned off the display and returned to his chair. "The legends are not legends, Lieutenant. They are simply what humans call Tuesday. Every impossible story we heard is true, and there are thousands more just like them." Vextel sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. "Commander, why was this information classified? Why did High Command not prepare us for what we would face?" The older officer's mandibles clicked softly as he considered his answer. "Because, Lieutenant, if the troops knew what humans were really capable of, half of them would refuse to fight and the other half would demand immediate retreat. The Empire has conquered 300 species, but we have never faced anyone like this before." Dawn broke gray and cold over the ruins of New Haven City as Commander HFY prepared for the final assault. 6 weeks of brutal fighting had reduced his mighty invasion force to barely 4,000 effective troops. The humans had cost them dearly for every street, every building, and every block they conquered. General Kriksta stood beside the commander on a hilltop overlooking the last human stronghold. The building had once been New Haven's city hall, but the defenders had turned it into an impregnable fortress. Smoke rose from its damaged walls and scorch marks showed where countless battles had been fought. Intelligence reports indicate fewer than 50 human defenders remaining, sir, Kriksta said through his damaged helmet communicator. They have no heavy weapons, no air support, and limited ammunition. This should be our final victory. Zexai nodded silently as he studied the enemy position through his tactical scope. The humans had fought for every inch of their city, with a determination that defied logic. They never retreated, never surrendered, and never showed fear even when facing certain death. All units report ready for final assault, Commander, called Major Hexron from the communications station. Artillery batteries are targeting the building's main supports. One concentrated bombardment should bring the whole structure down. The alien commander lowered his scope and looked at his surviving officers. These were experienced veterans who had conquered dozens of worlds for the Empire. But 6 weeks of fighting humans had changed them in ways that might never heal. Negative on the artillery strike, Zexai said quietly. We will take that building with ground troops only. I want to see what manner of beings have cost us so much. Lieutenant Vextul approached his commander with confusion in his yellow eyes. The young officer had aged years in the past weeks as he watched human defenders perform impossible feats of courage and determination. Sir, our troops are exhausted and demoralized. A direct assault will cost us hundreds more casualties. Why not simply bomb them into submission? Zexai turned to face his officers, and for a moment they could see something in his dark eyes that might have been respect for their enemies. Because, Lieutenant, these humans have earned the right to face us warrior to warrior. They have fought with more honor than we deserve. The final assault began at sunrise with 4,000 alien soldiers advancing on 50 human defenders. The odds were 80-1 in favor of the invaders, but somehow that did not feel like enough. The humans had taught them that numbers meant nothing against absolute determination. Colonel Steve Patterson crouched behind a makeshift barricade on the building's second floor, checking his rifle for the last time. His uniform was torn and bloody from weeks of combat, but his green eyes still burned with fierce resolve. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Amy Brooks prepared her remaining explosives with steady hands. Contact front, called out Corporal Danny Murphy from a window position. Large enemy force approaching from all directions. I count at least 3,000 hostiles. Patterson keyed his radio and spoke to his remaining defenders scattered throughout the building. All stations, this is Overwatch. They are coming in force for the final push. Make every shot count and remember why we are here. For Earth, came the responses from his tiny command. For New Haven. For our families. The building shook as alien weapons began pounding its walls with concentrated fire. Chunks of concrete and twisted metal fell from the ceiling as the structure groaned under the assault. But the human defenders held their positions and returned fire with deadly accuracy. Patterson moved from position to position, encouraging his people and directing their defense. A piece of shrapnel caught him in the shoulder, but he ignored the wound and continued fighting. His radio crackled with reports from his scattered forces. Second floor east is under heavy attack. We need reinforcements. Ammunition running low on the third floor. Can anyone spare magazines? They have broken through the basement level, falling back to prepared positions. Brooks appeared at Patterson's side carrying a wounded Marine to safety. Blood stained her uniform, but she showed no sign of slowing down. Steve, we cannot hold much longer. They have us surrounded and outnumbered. The colonel reloaded his weapon and smiled grimly. Amy, we were never supposed to hold them forever. We just needed to buy time for the evacuation ships to escape. Mission accomplished. Outside the building, General Kriksta led his troops through the final breach in the human defenses. Alien soldiers poured through holes blasted in the walls by heavy weapons. They expected to find broken defenders ready to surrender, but instead met fierce resistance at every turn. Human fighters appeared from hidden positions to launch devastating attacks before disappearing again. Every room had to be cleared at great cost in alien lives. The defenders fought with knives and improvised weapons when their ammunition ran out, but they never stopped fighting. Third floor secured, reported Major Hexron over the radio, but we lost another 50 troops getting there. These humans fight like nothing I have ever seen. Kriksta reached the main command center where Colonel Patterson had made his final stand. The human officer lay motionless beside his radio equipment, surrounded by empty ammunition magazines and makeshift weapons. Even in death, his hand still gripped his rifle. "General, we have secured the building," called one of his subordinates. "The last human defenders are eliminated. New Haven is finally ours." But victory felt hollow as Crixta surveyed the scene around him. His mighty invasion force had been reduced to fewer than 3,000 survivors. They had conquered one small city at the cost of 7,000 trained soldiers and dozens of armored vehicles. Commander Zexhai arrived as the final shots echoed through the ruined building. He walked slowly through the debris, examining the human positions with professional interest. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The humans had turned every room into a deadly trap. They had used furniture pipes and even torn clothing to create weapons and defensive positions. Empty food containers showed they had been surviving on minimal rations for weeks while never losing their fighting spirit. "Commander, look at this," Vextol called from a corner office that had served as the human communication center. They were still sending messages until the very end. Zexhai approached the radio equipment and found several recorded messages waiting to be transmitted. His translator converted the human words into something he could understand, but the meaning was clear in any language. The first message was from Colonel Patterson, addressed to someone named General Murphy on Earth. "And sir, we held New Haven for 43 days against overwhelming odds. Enemy casualties exceed 70% of their invasion force. Recommend immediate mobilization of home fleet. The legends are real and Earth must be ready." Another recording came from Lieutenant Commander Brooks speaking to her family. "Mom and Dad, I want you to know that we did our duty here. Every day we held them was another day for our people to escape and prepare. Tell my little sister Karen that her big sister went out fighting." But it was the final message that struck Zexhai like a physical blow. It came from Corporal Murphy speaking directly to the alien forces. "To whoever finds this recording, know that New Haven stood for 43 days. We are just one small colony with a few hundred defenders. Earth has billions of people just like us, and they will come for you. We are coming." Zexhai stood in silence as the full implications hit him. New Haven was not humanity's last stand, but merely their first response. Somewhere in the depths of space, entire human fleets were already moving to avenge this world and its people. Lieutenant Vextol approached his commander with a datapad containing casualty reports. "Sir, final count shows 7,300 alien dead versus approximately 800 human casualties. They killed 9 of our soldiers for everyone we eliminated." The numbers told a story that chilled Zexhai to his core. If a few hundred colonial defenders could inflict such losses, what would happen when they faced Earth's actual military forces? What would happen when billions of humans learned what had occurred at New Haven? "Commander," called the communications officer from across the room, "we are receiving priority transmissions from Fleet Headquarters. They want immediate status reports on our victory." Zexhai walked to the broken window and looked out over the smoking ruins of New Haven City. They had won the battle, but at what cost? His invasion force was shattered, his ships were damaged, and his troops were demoralized beyond recovery. More concerning were the human bodies scattered throughout the building. Every one of them had died facing the enemy with weapons in their hands. Not a single defender had tried to surrender or escape when the end came. They had fought until their last breath for principles the aliens could barely understand. "Sir, what should I tell Fleet Command?" the communications officer asked again. "They are waiting for our victory report." For a long moment, Commander Zexhai stood silent at the window, watching smoke rise from the conquered city. His officers waited for him to speak for orders that would shape their next actions. But the words would not come. Finally, Vextol approached his commander with growing concern. "Sir, the fleet is requesting immediate response." "What are your orders?" Zexhai turned from the window and looked at his surviving officers.